So you've just got your new DJI Osmo Pocket 4 and you want to be able to capture the best footage possible. You can get some really nice looking footage anyway, just using the standard color profile and using the auto settings on the Pocket 4. But if you do want to make your footage stand out compared to others, then you really need to go deeper into the settings and use some of these accessories that we'll mention later in the video to be able to get the cinematic footage that you do want. So the first thing you want to do is swipe left from the right into your camera settings and then click on the little Pro button at the top right corner. I personally use auto exposure a lot when I am out traveling. If I do want the most cinematic and professional footage possible, I do change it to manual exposure. Now the reason why you want to set it to manual exposure is so you have complete control over your shutter speed and your ISO. This stops your frame from changing exposure mid-shot when you are filming. If you do move from outdoors to indoors a lot in your vlogs though, and you do want to try and live in the moment and not constantly be on the camera changing your exposure settings all the time, then I do strongly recommend you do change the ISO to 400 to 6400, so it is only your ISO that does change. It is a vlog at the end of the day, so you don't want to constantly be going into your settings and making sure that you have the perfect exposure all the time. You do want to try and enjoy what you are doing and live in the moment, but it is best to keep it at a fixed ISO though if you're mainly outside or inside, so the exposure doesn't keep changing mid-shot. The biggest setting that you do need to change though to make your DJI Pocket 4 as cinematic as possible is definitely your shutter speed. There does tend to be a shutter rule in filmmaking, which you definitely don't have to stick to, but 95% of the time everyone does, and that is to set your shutter speed to double your frame rate. So for example, if you're shooting in 25 frames per second like I am now, you want to set your shutter speed to 1/50 per second. This helps keep the natural motion blur that we see in real life in your videos, and it's also why films look so real and natural. If you set your shutter speed to 1/500 of a second though, there will be no motion blur when there is motion in the frame, and it will just look a little bit weird and unnatural. Now this will look pretty good when you are inside, when you've set the ISO to a number that looks pretty well exposed, but you definitely will notice a problem when stepping outside because your footage is going to look like a complete white mess. And that's because the Pocket 4 has a fixed aperture of f2, so you can't change the aperture to like f5.6 to f8 to actually bring the image darker, so actually get the proper exposure. You can only change either the shutter speed or your ISO. But the problem with that is, even with your ISO at its lowest at either 100 or 400, it's still going to be way too bright. So you have to change your shutter speed to, at the minute what I've done now is 1/1000th of a second. But the problem with that is you lose that motion blur like we mentioned earlier. Well, this is actually where ND filters come into play to actually darken your image and bring that motion blur back. Think of it as basically having sunglasses for your lens. And the filters that we're going to be talking about today are ones from Freewell. Freewell were kind enough to send me these, but they are not sponsoring this video at all, and I'm not being paid by them. I did just want to showcase them in this video because ND filters are absolutely essential if you do want cinematic footage. In this ND filter set, you get an ND 8, 16, and 32, as well as 5 CPL filters, with 4 of them ranging from ND 8, 16, 32, and 64. Freewell also sent over another set of ND filters, which include a 40mm macro lens, a 0.9 times wide angle lens, and a 1.1 times anamorphic lens. They also included a fixed ND 8, 16, and 32 filters again, but these filters are slightly different to the other set because these ones are stackable with the anamorphic and wide angle lens. This is absolutely amazing because for some reason, if you actually use the wide angle lens that's included in the creator combo on the DJI Pocket 4, you can't use it with an ND filter, not even with DJI's own ND filter that they do sell. But luckily these filters from Freewell actually allow you to use the ND filters with the wide angle lens. I will leave the link in the description below as well if you are interested in picking them up. So now you've got your exposure settings sorted, the next setting is honestly probably more important to actually get a cinematic and nice looking image, and that is your white balance. You really need to change this from auto to manual to avoid any weird color shifts mid-shot, because when I first tested out the Pocket 4, I had it in auto white balance and it completely ruined the shot and it made it just look really weird and green. So it's essential that you do set it yourself to get the absolute best image possible. As a standard, just set your white balance to 5600 Kelvin and the tint to 0. This is great if you are outside, but you may want to change it if the lighting in the room that you're in is either really cool or really warm. If you're enjoying this video so far and found it helpful, then it would be amazing if you could hit that subscribe button so you don't miss videos like this in the future, and it does just really help me out. The next setting to change is your color profile. To unlock the 14 stops of dynamic range on your Pocket 4, you need to change this from standard color mode to D-Log. This will actually make your shot look really flat and desaturated, but don't worry, this is actually how the camera captures the most amount of detail in the highlights and the shadows to be able to get that 14 stops of dynamic range. You can turn on color recovery mode as well to bring back the color when you are looking at the screen when you're filming. When you do watch the footage back in the camera though, and when you bring it back into your editing software like DaVinci Resolve, the footage will look very grey and desaturated because it is in log. But all you have to do is apply a D-Log to Rec 709 conversion LUT to bring back the color and contrast. And if you're actually sign up to my email list using the link in the description below, you'll actually get the most accurate conversion LUT that I actually have made in DaVinci Resolve using the color space transform effect. To actually get some really cool looks for your Pocket 4, I also have a DJI cinematic LUT pack for sale on my website for you to purchase if you are interested. The link is in the description below if you do want to go check it out. The next setting to change is the texture setting. Now this is personal preference, but if you do want your Pocket 4's footage to look a little bit more natural and soft looking, then you want to change this to either -1 or -2, as the DJI Osmo footage does look quite sharp and digital like phones do compared to a traditional cinema or mirrorless camera. You can also apply some noise reduction, but I tend to just leave this as 0 because if I do want to do my own noise reduction, I can just do that in DaVinci Resolve. Now there's actually another hidden setting that quite a lot of people tend to miss to actually help get you the best footage possible, and that is changing the bitrate from standard to high. This will make the file sizes slightly larger, but it will also make the footage less compressed, and it will make it a lot easier to color grade your footage as well when you are shooting in D-Log. Now another really important thing to change on your Pocket 4 is the gimbal settings. Having motion blur and shooting in D-Log to get that great dynamic range is great, but if your footage is really shaky or too quick and responsive, then it will look very amateur and the opposite of cinematic. So what you want to do is swipe down on the settings and then click on this little icon here and change the speed to slow. Next to that is your gimbal mode. If you're actually doing more of a push-in shot, then it's best to change this to the tilt locked mode so the gimbal doesn't tilt up or down when you are shooting. And if you're doing like a reveal shot, it's best to change this to follow mode. Now, even though most of the time you probably use your Pocket 4 for travel or like natural vlogs where you're just filming any lighting condition, if you do want to use it as more of like a studio camera, then the most important way to make your videos look cinematic and professional is lighting. Now, lighting is far more important than shooting in D-Log and having motion blur because it's what creates depth in your image. So if you are shooting in a studio environment like I am now, just grab a nice 60-watt light with a softbox or China ball and place it about 45 degrees to either side of your face to create a shadow like I have now, and your footage will look 10 times better than without one. Now, if you don't have the room or budget to buy a nice light, then the most simple and easiest way to get really nice flattering lighting is simply just filming next to a window. If you didn't know, Christopher Nolan's first ever movie, The Following, was shot entirely using natural lights, and if you actually look at all of the different shots, most of the shots are literally just them standing by windows. Or if you actually did get the creator combo, you can just start by using the included fill light, which isn't perfect, but it's a great starting point to when you eventually do buy a bigger light in the future. So these settings that we spoke about today will definitely give you the best looking and natural footage with the most amount of dynamic range for your new DJI Osmo Pocket 4. But sometimes, honestly, the best and most fun way to use this camera is definitely by just sticking it into auto mode and using the standard color profile, which is what I have done with my Pocket 3 for years, especially if you do want to live in the moment and just have a fun time, which is honestly what these Pocket cameras are probably designed for anyway. So if you did find this helpful, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss another video out like this in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and if you did want to see a comparison between the DJI Pocket 4 and the Pocket 3, then watch this video next.